Hello guys, and welcome to the very first section of this introductory to Python programming course. I'll be using Jupyter Notebook for the purpose of this course, and I would like to show you how you can do that as well. If you have a Google account, you just need to go to google.com and type Google Colab, and you should go to Google to see either this as the first or this. Google Colab is basically an environment for us to write our Python code and see the result of our Python code. The choice for Jupyter Notebook is so that anybody can get started with writing their Python code. Otherwise, you will then need to install Python, as I have shown you in the introductory video of this course. If you have not yet installed Python on your local machine and you would love to do that, there are links in the slides that leads you to the tutorials to how you can download Python on your local device. But if perhaps you're still having issues, or you're just trying Python for the first time and you're thinking of not installing Python on your computer yet, then you can use the Jupyter Notebook to actually still write the Python syntax and run the code to see the results. And it's quite easy. If you have a Gmail, this is quite easy to do. As long as you have Gmail, then you can have access to Google Colab, because Google Colab was actually built by the Google team. And this is why you need a Google account to actually use Jupyter Notebook. So let's just take a look at this. When you come to Google, when you click that link, you would basically come to see this page where it tells you welcome to Colaboratory. And you can just check out this video, you can watch this video, you can see to know more about it. But you can see that they are just showing us how we can actually write our code in Google Colab. So you can come to file and then you do new notebook. You can name it to maybe first class or whatever name you want, and just click enter. And you can see that by default it has already created an interface for you to write your code. The second thing is to just connect the runtime. And right now I'm just going to write a print statement in Python. So hello world, which is quite famous. And we can run that, and you can see that right now I'm all set up to start writing my Python programming. So this is why Colab is one tool that I would highly recommend for people who are new to programming. We are just trying their hands and they are not sure of installations, or even having issues with installations. It's like an online editor that has been built for Python programming, and you can use it to run your code. You can see that the extension is saved not as a .py but as an interactive Python notebook. That is what IPYNB is, just mean interactive Python notebook, because it is interactive basically. And that is actually how you get started with your Jupyter Notebook. And if you want to know where this file is located in your Google Drive, you can click on file and just do locate in Drive, and that will take you to the location of the file. In case you close your tab and you just want to go back to it, you can know where it is located in your Google Drive. Given this, we'll just get started with what this section will be covering. So in this section, we are going to learn about Python operators, and then we'll move to data types in Python, and then we'll move to Python variables, typecasting. We'll learn about the implicit and explicit typecasting, and as a bonus we'll look into string formatting and what it is about. So first of all, we'll go back to the very basics of mathematics to introduce operators. We have different operators in math. We have logical operators, we have assignment operators, and a host other of different kind of operators. For the simplicity that I want to ensure that we have in this course, I'm just going to introduce you to assignment operators, because I am sure that by the time you get one section of operators, when you come across the other operators, it will be easy for you to catch up. I do not want to overwhelm people who are just beginning. And for assignment operators, the operator types under assignment are very linked to the basics of our mathematics, like multiplication, addition. So 2 times 2, we know that. 4 times 2, we know that. 4 minus 7, we know that. And in the same way, we can express this mathematical assignment operators in Python. Just in case you are not familiar with number 5 and number 6, exponent is something that I'm sure you already know. Probably it's just the word that is different. Is what we can otherwise call raised to power. So if I say 5 raised to power 2, it means that I want to multiply 5 by itself 2 times, and that will be 25. If I say 3 raised to power 3, it means I want to multiply 3 by itself 3 times. If I say 2 raised to power 3, it means I want to multiply 2 by itself 3 times. So I want to say 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. And that will give us 2 times 2, 4, 4 times 2, 8. So we can say 2 raised to power 3 is 8. For modulo, this is also what we know as remainder. What do I mean by that? If we say 9 divided by 3, we know that the answer is 3. And we do not have any remainder. The remainder is 0. That is what modulo means. It means that if I say 5, for example, modulo 2, I'm basically saying, what is the remainder when I say 5 divided by 2? So 5 modulo 2, we will start from division. So 5 divided by 2 will give us 2 with a remainder of 1. So that remainder is the modulo. So if I say 5 modulo 2, what I expect that I will get as my result is 1. So let's see how we do this in Python. As you see, I've added this to a print statement, which is an inbuilt function in Python that helps us print to the console. It helps us see the output to the console. And we will see here that I have 5 minus 6. 8 multiplied by 9 is just the same. I've just written it the way we write it in our notebook. 6 divided by 2. And I'm also going to show you, what floor division means. But let's just go on with, we can even already see the result. And floor division is basically returning, if we do 5 divided by 2, we know that the answer that is going to give us is going to be having the decimal point, which is 2.5. Let's change this to 5. So this is 2.5, but when you do floor division, it rounds it up to the lowest decimal point. So if we are going to, you can name it highest decimal point is going to be 3, but this double slash means floor division, and in Python we use this symbol double slash instead of 1 slash, and it just gives us 2.0. So it rounds up to the lowest decimal point. And for modulo 2, we expect that to be 0 because we know that there is no remainder. But if we do 5 modulo 2, we are going to see that the modulo is 1. And here I'm showing you how precedence of operators work in Python. You would see that when we say 2 multiplied by 10 plus 3, it starts with the addition first of all. So 10 plus 3 is 13, and then it's then multiply. So when you think about BODMAS, for instance, is bracket of division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. So you can see that here we first of all have to do, like Python does not use the BODMAS like sequence. Is first of all because multiplication comes before addition in BODMAS, but you see here that addition comes first. So it starts from the right, and then it works its way back to the front of the equation that we have written. And like I mentioned, 2 double star means asterisk, which is 2 raised to power 4. What happens if we do 5 divided by 0? We know that mathematically this is not possible, so we expect that will give us an error. And as you see, we have the 0 division error there because we cannot divide by 0. So let's move on. something that I also want to show you. Moving on now, let's talk about data types. So I like to explain data types using things that we are already familiar with. This is how I like to teach. But before we go into what data type is, let's start with what is data. Data is basically an information. It could be digital. My book is a data. My physical book is a data. This course right now, I saved it as a file. For instance, it's a data. And we have different data types. Like we have different kind of data. For instance, like my book, when I'm going to have my book and I want to put it in a particular section, I want to arrange them, I'm not going to put my books on my shoe rack, because that's not where it belongs. That's not where that type of data, that type of piece of information belongs to. I'm going to put my books in a bookshelf. If I have my shoes, I'm not going to put my shoes in my kitchen cabinet. If I'm not a psychopath, I'm going to put my shoes where it belongs to, the shoe racks. If I don't even have a shoe racks, I'm not going to put my shoe in the kitchen. I'm going to put my shoe in the room where it belongs, because that's where that kind of data belongs to. If you think of kitchen utensils, I'm not going to bring my pots, my spoons, my utensils, and I'll bring it to the living room or take it to the bedroom. I'm going to put it in the kitchen, because that's where that kind of data, that's where those kind of things belong to. In the same way, we can extend this to Python and the different data types that we have in Python. Now, what are the different data types that we have in Python? We have integers, we have floats, we have string, and we have boolean. But I'm going to now explain the different types that we have. For integers, this is what we already know in mathematics. So an integer is a whole number in math. So the whole number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, minus 12, minus 7, 0, they are all we call them integer. In Python, we call them integer. In math, we call them whole number, but they are still the same concept. It's just that the nomenclature is different. So we call them integers in Python. Now for your decimal numbers in math, where you have 5 point something, minus 23.6, and all of that, we call them floats in Python. They are called float numbers. And then we have the string. The string is a data type for text, for alphabet, for characters, for sentences. So when you think about strings, we put them in, when we are declaring a string, we either put them in a single quote or a double quote, as we see here. We can put them in double or single quotes, and we call them speech marks. Strings are usually associated with when we are thinking of things like names, because names are not numbers. When you think of addresses, we can say it's a string, because we know that address are a mix of string and number. So we cannot say a whole address, like when I'm saying number 5 Jane Street. 5 is a number, but it's already mixed with Jane Street as a whole address, and we cannot say Jane Street is a number. However, we can associate that number 5 Jane string as a string. If we are going to be separating it like 5 separately, Jane Street separately, then we can say 5 is a number. But once you are mixing a number or a decimal with a string value, with something that cannot be a number or a float, then we call it a string. So, and that's why I said, and anything that is not float or integer, we can usually categorize them as string. So, for example, you can see that we have a mix of alphanumeric here, that is, it has alphabet and it has numbers. We can declare them as strings. The other one that I was supposed to mention is the boolean, but we'll come back to that later. So this is just me declaring a string. Like I mentioned, a string, we can basically use the speech marks of double quotes, or we can use single quotes. Using the wrong speech marks will definitely cause an error. For example, if I start with a double quote and I want to end with a single quote, that's not going to work, or vice versa, single quotes, double quotes, that's not going to work. And that is why you see that there is an error here. Now, the last data type is called boolean. And Boolean can either be two things, true or false. True or false. That is how, like, Boolean is a data type that can hold just two values, either true value or false value. And we will see how we use these Boolean values later on in the course of this course. And how we declare a true value is basically this keyword. So keywords, what are keywords? Keywords are things that already exist in Python. That is, you cannot use them by yourself because they already have an existing function that exists in the Python compiler. They have used it as in the Python compiler as something that's already as a function, so you cannot declare that same keyword and say you want to use it in your code and declare your own new function. And for Boolean value, we either have the value to be true, like we mentioned, or false. And you see that when you do the type of true, is going to give us bool, which is saying that it's a Boolean value. So that is what we have here. Now, how do you really know the type of your string? You can know the type of your string by doing type, or the type of, whatever you have declared a string. And when you do this, you are going to find out that it returns the type as a string. So how do you know if you have an object, and you want to know what the type is, like what the data type is? You can do type, which is an inbuilt function, a keyword that, like this true, that exists in Python that we can use to find out the data type that we have put. And if I put 1, 2, 3, what do you think it will be? Remember, we have integers, floats. I hope you guessed right, because yes, it's going to tell us that it's an integer. And if I do 12.3, what do you think it will be? You can see it tells us that it's a float. So this is how, we can check the type of any objects that we have.
Hello there. If you have enjoyed this course so far, kindly support me and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe will also help you know when newer courses are released. Thank you for subscribing. I do hope you have. Let's carry on with the course.
I hope that was clear. Now we are going to move into Python variables. Now for Python variables, I want you to think of your brain. You store information in your brain. And over time, some information can remain. Sometimes you lose some information. Sometimes you can't remember, an incident that happened some years back or stuffs like that. The same way, Python variables are supposed to be like a container that stores data values. And once we store that data in that reserved memory, in that particular variable, it is stored in a reserved memory. It means that what we have assigned to that variable is what the variable will continue to hold. And in the brain, the information that we store in the brain, they are like pointers to events. So if I store in my brain, like, let's say my birthday, 16th of April, for instance, every time 16th of April is mentioned anywhere, what I'm going to remember is my birthday, because that variable, like the date, stands like a variable that points to an event in my memory. So for example, if I probably got married, a destination wedding, I went to probably Maldives, because yes, I would love to visit Maldives someday. I got to Maldives for my wedding. Every time someone mentioned the word Maldives, like, see that Maldives as a variable now. Every time someone mentioned that word Maldives, I'm just going to remember, oh, this was where I had my wedding. This was where we got married. And, it starts opening up different things that I have stored in my memory. Likewise, a Python variable is a reference or a pointer to an object, just like that piece of information we remember that can be linked to an event or series of events. And in summary, we can say that variables are usable, they are reusable label for a data value in Python. The reason why is because for every time we think of that variable, what the variable will point to is that information that it is linked to. And now we are going to see, how we declare variable in Python. So an example of variable can be my name. So when you say what's your name, that name is variable, like it's variable. However, when you ask me what's my name, I'm going to say my name is Yeti. So every time you say what's your first name, I'm going to say Yeti. Every time you say what's your first name, my name is Yeti. Every time you say what's your age, it is attached to something. And in the same way, we can, you know, um do this with variables, and variables would usually point to data types. As you would see here, my first name is not a number, right? It's a string. My username, when you are signing up for on a website, most of the websites, username, user ID, unless you see user ID, then that will be probably just numbers. But username sometimes can be just the English alphabet that we know, or it can be alphanumeric, right? But like I mentioned earlier, when you're already having alphanumeric, you do not qualify that as a decimal, like an integer or a float. Is a string. And when you think of my age, for instance, my age is an integer. The year of birth is an integer, you know. And when you think of height should hold, float. When you think of shoe size, for instance, it should be float, because sometimes it should be float. Sometimes we have, maybe someone that is just size 7, then we can see that as an integer. But once you do 7.0, for instance, it's float. Then for the boolean value, we can also create a variable and then assign it to a boolean value like false or true. One thing I would like to say is that when you are creating your variable, whatever pointer that is pointing to should be intuitive, should be self-explanatory, to say that this variable, this is actually what it will hold. So what do I mean? When you look at this, why should I, if I want to set maybe let's say the age of someone, for instance, I should be using a variable name that is intuitive, to say that what that variable holds is actually age. I should not be saying first name is equals to 12, or when I want to say somebody's year of birth, and then I assign that to, for example, a string value. If you get what I mean, I declare a variable year of birth and it's pointing to somebody's name, like the year of birth is Yeti. Like that does not make any sense, right? So when you are declaring your variable, you usually use names that are self-explanatory for anybody that is reading your code to understand. The reason is because when you start working professionally in fields, you're going to have sometimes in a team you can have 10 people working on one code base, and you have written your code, somebody else is coming to build some stuff on top of your code. The best way that you can help them is that they understand the code you have written. When you are declaring your variables, they understand what you have done. But when you think of you also joining an organization, somebody is declaring a variable year of birth, and the year of birth is pointing to Yeti, like that will get confused, right? So this is why when you're declaring variable, you use the right keywords, you use the right self-explanatory meaning to convey what that variable is actually holding, like the pointer that is holding. And that's why I said, if you say Maldives, for instance, what comes to my mind is like honeymoon, right? So, but if you say Maldives, I cannot link Maldives to something that is, I cannot say Maldives and then I'm not remembering my birthday if I never, maybe celebrated my birthday there once or something. And yeah, so variables can be characters or sentences as well. So I can say the first alphabet, so it can be just a single character in in capital letter or small letter. It can also be a whole string, right? So that's something that I wanted to also point out, that we can declare variable as anything. And yeah, I think this is something that we are already familiar with. Now you may wonder, how do we use variables? Like, how can you link variable to all of these softwares that you use? So for instance, when you go to YouTube, right, when you go to YouTube, you see your channel name, for instance, like your name on YouTube, which is like the name that you have used to sign up when you signed up to Gmail, because we know that you access your YouTube from your Gmail account. That is actually a variable. right? In the code base, somebody has set a variable that is now pulling your username from the storage system. Of course, we are not dealing with databases, but that is actually how variable works. So the person have set the variable such that they are not hard coding your name there. However, what the code here can be, for example, if they have said this is your first name, what the code here can be is another code that selects that person that has logged in. It's go and find their username from the storage when they signed up, where it has stored it, and then it brings it to the code base. And when the front-end developer is showing that username, it picks the right information. You don't log into YouTube and then you see my name or you see somebody else's name. You see your name because it has been stored somewhere and it has been in the code base. Somebody has assigned a variable such that variable, every time you log in, it knows that it is you, and it goes to find the information that belongs to you in the storage system. Now we're going to move to typecasting. Now, typecasting is basically the process of converting the value of one data type to another data type. So let's say I want to go from integer, I want to convert an integer to float. I want to convert a string to float. You may wonder, how is that possible? How can I make Yeti, for instance, which is a string, to float? So there are certain conversions that cannot happen, and there are certain conversions that will happen. And we have two types of type conversion in Python. We have the implicit type conversion. We have the explicit type conversion. What does the implicit type conversion do? It is a way where Python converts one data type to another without the need of the user intervention. And we're going to see an example. So now I've declared a variable num_int and it's 100, and a num_float, which is 2.9, because we know floats are decimal numbers. And now what I'm doing is I've created another variable where I am now saying the value of this variable should be the addition of num_int and num_float. Remember that we've covered Python operators, but here I'm just replacing this variable because I've assigned this variable to these values. Now let's see what that gives us. One thing I want you to notice that the num_int, of course, the type is num_int and is integer, and the type of the num_float is float. However, when we have added them, what is the value of new num? The value of new num, right, is 102.9, and you can see that the data type of num_new is now float. So we have we added two numbers that are integers and floats. However, Python does an implicit conversion of making this 100.0 when the addition takes place, and so therefore by the time we get the final result, it becomes implicitly, because we are not converting it ourselves. We are going to see how we convert. We see that it becomes a float type. So this is what we mean. We moved from having this integer here, and by the time we added it to a float, it just does an implicit conversion and converts it to float for us. Let's look at the same example and try to do the same thing. So we have the num_int that is 100, and now we have num_string where this is 29, right? And we have printed the data type of num_int, which is integer, and the num_string, this should be num_string. This is a typo. So num_string, which is let's print that again, which is now string. So you then wonder, can we add num_it to num_string? You can see that there is a type error and it tells you unsupported operand, because these are operand types for int and string, because there is no way this is going to work. And this is me just showing you what's an integer, when we want to convert a string to a number, how we do that. So we use the int function, which is also an inbuilt function. We pass in the string that we want, and then we can do the explicit. So this is like the introduction of what we know as the explicit, because it requires the user intervention. I'm doing it myself. So given this, we know that this is a string because it's in the speech mark quotes. However, we have converted it to minus 34. Now, if we do type int minus 34, you will see that it's now integer. However, if we do it before, we do type of minus 34, that is string, but we have used the integer function, which is, you can see that when I highlight on the Jupyter Notebook explains to us that it converts a number or string to an integer, right, or return 0 if you do not put anything in the argument, which is this bracket. So this is how we do explicit conversion. Here, remember, we didn't have to do any explicit conversion, and because they are compatible in terms of the operations we have done on it is compatible, it just explicitly do the conversion for us to float. Here, because we know that they are not compatible, it brings an error, and this is where explicit conversion comes in, where we can convert it to what we want, and after that we know that is an integer, we can then add it to, we can do the operation that we wanted to do. And that's what I've shown you here. I've created a variable num string to int because I'm converting string to int, and you can see that now I have the integer. This will become 29, and if we print that, because now it's an integer, we have our final answer. Now we'll move to the last section of this section 1. I hope you've enjoyed the course so far. I would advise that you try your hands on different things just to learn more. And now I would like to introduce you to string formatting, which is also known as string interpolation. In several programming languages like Python, JavaScript, this is very common. String formatting is common, and we will see how we can do that. But before we do that, I want you to have a recap of what these are. This is variables, and these are the values of the variables. So every time I access username, it's going to return precious. And what does string formatting mean? So I have declared these variables, and I would like to combine all of them to make a sentence. This is where string formatting comes in. So for string formatting, I'm actually going to clean this off, and we will start it from scratch. So string formatting is quite simple. So we start with our print function because we want to print to the interface, and because we want to print the string. So we'll start with what we want to add. So we'll say let's just say my name is dash, because what should be in this dash is precious, comma, and I am dash years old. My height is dash. Now the next thing that we would do, this dash we are still going to replace with something, because what we want, basically, if you print this, you can see it's just dash, but what we want is that we want it to pick the username when is my name, we want to print the age when is age, and height. The next thing for the syntax is then after our speech mark, which is holding our entire string, we then do dot format with a bracket, and then the first thing is what? My username, comma, age, comma, height. So let's see if this would work. It wouldn't anyway. You can see it's still dash. How does it pick this username and insert it here? We then replace this dash with what we call the curly brackets. We call this the curly brackets. Once we do this, this is the syntax that allows Python to then say, okay, this means that there is a gap that needs to be filled here with a variable. Then it comes here and say, since this is the first dash, let's just call it dash, but it's curly bracket. It comes here and say, it's username that should be there, and we have set the username, right? So we say it's precious. It replaces it with precious when it's printing to the console. It goes to the second dash. Okay, once the second dash here, the value age, What's the second dash here? Height. So let's see. As you see here, it has picked the right value. Perhaps if I come here and I put age, right, and then I come here and I put username, let's print that. You can see, say my name is 13 because the first, it comes here and basically say this is the first dash, and based on that I'm going to go to the format function and pick the first value, and that's why we have this error here. So whenever we are doing string interpolation and you are arranging the values, you make sure that the values that you have put in the format exactly follows this curly bracket, which I call the dash. Given that, the next thing we are going to do in the next class, we are going to look into conditional statements. We are going to look into control flow, and this is just the beginning of control flow. We are going to look into functions, and we're going to see what functions are, how we declare that. I hope that you've had fun with this course, and I hope to see you in the next section.
Hello there. If you have enjoyed this course so far, kindly support me and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe will also help you know when newer courses are released. Thank you for subscribing. I do hope you have. Let's carry on with the course.